Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. You know, I'm literally packing to head to San Francisco to RSA in a few days, and news broke that is pretty exciting. And I apologize. I'm not in our Techstrong TV studio today. I'm doing this one from home, but it couldn't wait, couldn't hold. Let me introduce you to Cecilia Marinier, who of course runs the innovation. It's innovation in another part of the
Scholars. Innovation
Scholars
Scholars program
program.
for the RSAC, Alan. I'm gonna
RSAC.
get you on it.
Oh no, I'm glad you caught me early because I'm a little discombobulated today.
No
Uh,
worries.
yep. Cecilia, it's great to see you. And I want to introduce you all to Laura Koetzle. Laura, thank you for coming here on Techstrong TV. Introduce yourself to the audience if you don't mind.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And I'm Laura Koetzle. I'm the head of community research for RSAC. So I produce a lot of the research about the cybersecurity community that's based on all the data that we collect as part of running all of the RSAC programs.
Fantastic. And and look, let's cut right to it, right? Uh, the reason we kind of stopped the presses here is you guys recently came out with a new report. Not recently, you just came out with a new report uh, that I think is going to be of interest to our audience. Cecilia, if it's okay with you, I'm going to have Laura kind of let you
Stage.
tell us about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, before I have Laura set the stage, I have to say this one small piece, which is everything is changing in cybersecurity. It's so exciting. And the reason that we talked about stopping the press, the report is super interesting, but we also had a really big event happen, which was the Wiz acquisition. And it sets the stage for what Laura is going to talk about because the Innovation Sandbox contest has consistently identified companies that have very, very strong trajectories after they've been on the stage. We're part of their story. We're not the only part of their story, but we wanted to make sure that we've got this whole thing set up for people to understand just how powerful the Innovation Sandbox is. And we have Laura here, who is the most awesome Laura, who actually is going to share a little bit more about like why we came up with this idea, and then maybe set a little bit more of the stage of what to expect in the report.
Sure. Well, and the other thing we should say is that that acquisition closing was actually the least convenient possible time ever because we had finished this report and published it. And then about an hour later, the news that the Wiz acquisition had closed came across the wires, which meant we had to scramble to update the report to contain the extra acquisition and the extra small amount of $32 billion in the amount of financing and investment received by the companies that have come out of Innovation Sandbox over the many years.
So
So
you don't
the
think they
reason
did that just to make your life difficult, do you?
I'm certain I was the only thing on their minds when they got approval to close
I
their
said, should
merger.
we wait till next week? No, let's get it. Laura just finished it. But
Yes. As Cecilia said, the metaphorical ink was not even dry on this thing when we had to update it. But we were happy to do it because what better kind of proof could you see of the impact of Innovation Sandbox than we can't even put out a report before things change and more investment happens. So on the one hand, it's slightly irritating. On the other hand, it's a great example of what we're trying to showcase.
fantastic. So let's give people, I feel like I jumped into the middle of the movie. It's apropos Oscars were last night. We could talk Oscars later, but it's the beginning of the movie. The report really highlights the tremendous success that these companies who have been involved in the Innovation Sandbox program over, what is it, 21 years, Cecilia,
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Over the 21 years. Laura, is that fair to say, or is there an
that's
official?
right. So what we tried to do was show kind of the overall trajectory of all of the top 10 finalists and winners from Innovation Sandbox. And I should say that one of the really interesting things you notice in the presentation of like 11 years of Innovation Sandbox history is the degree to which kind of upticks in categories of startups in Innovation Sandbox actually correlate with whatever major kind of trend there is in the cybersecurity industry the year after. So there's a graph in the first bit of the report that shows this. Now, that's correlation, not cause, right? So it's not, oh, there are more innovation sandbox in this category, and that causes the next year application security or whatever it is to be the most important thing in cybersecurity. But correlation's still pretty useful if you're trying to figure out where to place your bets and where to spend your money, whether you're a CISO or an investor or a member of the community. So that was really noteworthy. And then just looking at some of the finalists and what their trajectories have been, there are 5 case studies in this report altogether. And they're from companies from 2016 Innovation Sandbox on. And what you figure out is you might think, oh, well, these are clearly the best 5 stories out of Innovation Sandbox ever. No, because Wiz isn't even in here, and that they just got acquired for $32 billion. So the companies that are in, what we tried to do, Cecilia and I, with the companies that are in this, is to show kind of all the variety of successful outcomes that the companies in Innovation Sandbox exhibit. So there's 3 companies that were acquired by, and there's 1 entrepreneur who's had 2 companies in Innovation Sandbox that have both been acquired, which, and there are a bunch of cases like that. In fact, one of my favorite bits of the report is that one of the companies that was acquired from Innovation Sandbox in 2025 was acquired by a company whose CEO had been CEO of another Innovation Sandbox winner before, whose original, shall we say in quotes, Innovation Sandbox startup was itself acquired by an Innovation Sandbox winner from even further back. So you can really see how much the Innovation Sandbox has influenced the industry over the years just by looking at these things. And so in the report, in addition to the companies that have been acquired, you've got a company that has raised a whole bunch of different rounds of investment and is kind of aiming to become an independent software company by itself. And then you've got another one that's sort of much earlier in its journey, but where the entrepreneur's got a great story of how an investor called him the night before he was supposed to go on stage at Innovation Sandbox and said, okay, we want to fund your company, but this offer is only good if you do not go on stage in Innovation Sandbox. Like, no deal. And so the entrepreneur had to go and with his 2 co-founders think, like, are we going to bet on ourselves and go for Innovation Sandbox, or are we going to take the bird in the hand deal? He refused the deal. They went on stage, they won, and then they got a way better deal from sort of a much bigger group of investors later on. And of course, the original kind of blackmailing investors, if I could put it that way, phoned up later and said, we'd still like to invest. And the entrepreneur said, no, thanks. I got plenty of partners. So there are a ton of great stories like that from all of these entrepreneurs and from Innovation Sandbox throughout the years. So what the report tries to do is kind of bring that to life.
Yeah, through anecdotes. You know, the thing, Alan, that like I always give you the big numbers, like 18 point, well, I was saying 18.1 billion, but guess what? It's now 50 billion. It's 50 billion in investment you have or an acquisition. And then on the other side, you have over 100 of the 200 companies. So over 50% of them have been acquired. So I'm always leading with that, Alan, because those numbers stick to people. But actually, if you go down and you dive into the stories of who these people are and how it actually impacted them, that's what we wanted to get out of this report, is just to give people a glimpse of, hey, this is exciting. You should be in the room to see what the next top 10 are doing. And then also, if you're an entrepreneur, why, my goodness, like why not apply next year, because it could be you next. So I kind of feel like we wanted to be able to give people some kind of just a hook to learn and be more excited about what we're doing at RSAC, and to let them know like just how much we feel that we like to support innovation, but we also have the anecdotal stories that tell you, you know, those guys actually say it. The Rehan Jalil from Security AI says that his trajectory of his company, which he just sold for 2.7 billion, was based on the fact that he got on that stage. He got the legitimacy of the community behind him by having these judges select his company. And he feels like that really changed the way his company's trajectory landed. And we wanted to make sure that got into the report. So Laura did a very nice job making it really easy to it's very accessible, very simple. Like, let's go, just read the story, know what we're trying to get across, and then also we have the stats behind us. We're not just talking and giving you just fluff, marketing fluff. This is actually data, which is why we love Laura, because she's making it real.
Yeah, we've snuck enough numbers in there that I think people will be able, the more data oriented among you will be able to have a good time with the report as well. But the stories are, in my opinion, the stories are what sort of make it memorable, and so that's what we were attempting to get at. And you can also, so you don't think that Cecilia and I made this stuff up, listen to the entrepreneurs on video themselves telling some of their stories. So there are links in the report to some of the entrepreneurs in their own words. And so the reports are distillations of all the facts and figures about their companies, what they have said in those interviews, and some other interviews that we've done with them over the years. So we really encourage you to check it out. And Innovation Sandbox is next week. So if you are coming to our RSAC conference, and if you are not, why aren't you? Please come to Innovation Sandbox on Monday.
It's super fun. And if you can't make it physically there, for whatever reason, we do actually put those pitches up online afterwards. But this year we're doing some really fun things that you have to be in the room for. So definitely come and make the time. This is definitely worth putting on your agenda if you're at RSAC.
Absolutely. So guys, look, I've been in security 30 plus years. Not always in media. I've done several venture-backed startups. What you're describing, Laura, is the 6 degrees of separation. And right, who's the Kevin Bacon, right? The
Right.
Kevin Bacon of how security works. This is how security works. You could trace, and there's been studies that done this, like before your time. ISS was bought by IBM for, at the time, I think 60 billion, or maybe it was 200, not billion, million. They weren't doing $1 billion deals. But
It was
as
a different era when money
yeah,
was a lot harder to get by.
but as a result of that deal, the entire Atlanta cybersecurity community almost came out of that ISS IBM acquisition. This is why it's very, very, I don't want to use the word incestuous, but it's very connected, very connected.
I'm
And
glad you didn't use that word or
yeah,
even mention it, because
this
it's
is
like a tough word, man. But I
well,
hear, the thing is, I like to think of it more like it's a community. And the
yeah, it
community
is.
identifies and connects with one another, and they support one another. It is very unusual where you have the competitors actually, supporting one another. At the end of the day, that's part of it, because everybody knows we got to work together in order to really fight the good fight. So
It is
maybe
about
that would be framing it a little bit more gently. How's
no,
that?
we're all on this side of the mission, right? Which is because no one, I don't care, even Wiz or any company you want to mention, they can't do it by themselves either. We
Right.
all we all need to pull together, and that goes for both public and private, not
Yep.
just public companies. I mean government, private industry, and everything else. That's the enormity of the task in front of us, especially with what's going on in the world today with wars and cyber attacks and nation state involvement. We can't afford to build walls or silos, right? We all need to be together, and I think that's one of the nice things about innovation is it fosters that kind of sense of community. Now, real important, people watching this, they're going to see this before next week, because we recorded this on a Monday in case you're listening, and we'll have it up. Well, by Wednesday, we'll certainly have it up, if not tomorrow. Where can we get the report?
We can give you the link to put alongside the
We will put a
podcast. Is
link.
probably the easiest
How
way.
about if we go to the RSA site, can we look for it?
Yeah.
RSAC.
RSA.
RSAC side.
Yeah, if you go to if you
Go ahead,
go
Laura.
to rsaconference.com, you and go to the library, you can find it there. So, and we'll also give you an easy link, so you just have to click.
All right, we'll try to get that link into the notes then too as well. Laura, Cecilia, thanks for coming on today. Appreciate it. This is a great thing, actually. You know what? So many reports today are just facts and figures, and you've got your facts and figures, and 50 billion is a big number. But getting real people, in this case, real entrepreneurs, cyber entrepreneurs, talking about this and how important it was, and showing the connections and how the web of community kind of engulfs us is really, really important. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing what you do all year round, because you know Monday show day, but it's an all year round thing, running innovation and scholarship. So I will see you guys out in San Francisco.
We look forward to seeing
You
you
there.
there.
All righty. Laura, great work, Laura Koetzle, and of course, Cecilia Marinier. Thank you so much, ladies. We'll see you next week at RSAC. We'll go check out the report now to give you an idea of really what Innovation Sandbox has been doing for 21 years and why you want to be part of it. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We'll be back in a minute. Hey everyone, it's Alan Shimel from Techstrong again. Welcome to our next session in our recent Futurum Techstrong sessions with our friends at Microsoft. Today's session is Patterns of Success, and it features Michelle Lancaster, General Manager and Partner for Global Leader for Business Strategy and AI Business Solutions at Microsoft, and Futurum's own Mitch Ashley, Software Development Life Cycles. Michelle is going to unpack the patterns of success emerging from the most transformative customer engagements Microsoft has seen. In this particular session, you're going to see how organizations are successfully operationalizing AI through apps, agents, and chat to drive measurable outcomes. It's not science fiction. It's not vaporware. These are real live engagements that are with real outcomes and real metrics to look at. You can expect a strategic overview of what is really working, why it matters, what's not working, and why that matters. And you can use these insights to drive and scale business impact with intelligent apps. Let's go to Michelle and Mitchell now. I hope you enjoy this session.
Thanks, Alan. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I am VP and Practice Lead of the Software Lifecycle Engineering practice at the Futurum Group.
And I'm Michelle Lancaster. I lead business strategy in our go-to-market team for Microsoft's AI Business Solutions team.
Michelle, I'm really excited to talk to you about this. The market is really energized around agentic business applications, AI agents, all of this. What's your experience about how customers are approaching and reaching out to go after this to start to energize their businesses with these technologies?
We've seen in the past 6 months or so, a lot of the hype cycles start to turn into the tri-cycle. And that is not a three-legged instrument here. It's really, how do we go from thinking about AI and applications as something that people want to dabble in into something that is the future of their business? We're starting to see apps and agents and Copilot come together, starting to see the power of taking automated applications powered with agents and humans and running Copilot over top of it as their overall UX system. We're starting to see people go from individual productivity to things like, how can I change the way my business operates? And we're starting to see some really impressive results in terms of not just time savings, but real dollars saved as well across many industries.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some about the organizational patterns that are coming about that are helping enterprises successfully coordinate multi-agent orchestration across business functions to help them deliver an impact.
It's a big question. Well, maybe we'll try to take it bit by bit. Multi-agent orchestration is at the forefront of where real transformation starts to happen. Having individual agents improve efficiency is one thing. Multi-agent orchestration can actually drive that business transformation. That orchestration layer brings us back into the heart of what I think the Microsoft value proposition is, which is not just the agents and the automation intelligence, but back to the core of security and governance. So you need to make sure that we have governance in place, we have rules in place, we have the group identities in place, and we've cleanly defined those. It turns out that's also the secret sauce of the organization starting to move forward, finding the right use case and then starting with a foundation of security and a clear understanding of what the KPI is for that use case. Sounds relatively simple, but it is really the ticket to success of people going from launching individual agents, seeing full-scale business process transformation.
Michelle, it seems like we're kind of moving beyond the technology as the barrier to really how we approach implementing AI, whether it's as a productivity aid or marking agents to do work for us or even autonomous type agents. Can you talk a little bit about that progression and how companies are approaching it?
Yes. We really see this as a concept that we've called the frontier firm. We see that evolution through 3 different stages. It really starts with humans using agents as assistant. Think of Copilot, where you can summarize a team note or be reminded of the most important email in your box, really a individual worker aid around productivity. And we see lots of people experimenting in this space. We move into that second phase, which is humans working directly with agents. So more of an autonomous agent that is able to run a process, but is human-led. The human is directing it to do work, seeing the recipients of that work, and then continuing to move forward. People have started using researcher or analysts to summarize things ahead of a meeting. So that agent's really taking on that research work for you and delivering the final product with that prompt. What's really exciting is the number of companies we see shifting into the third stage of this, which is autonomous agents working with other agents and working with humans. Some of the places we start to see that advancement happening is in industries like manufacturing, where there are fairly complex processes where you are able to have multiple different types of agents working together to solve a problem. One of our customers has taken a look at supply chain management. They have an agent that's keeping track of the inventory inside all of their workplaces and in the places where they need to ship products. They have a reasoning agent going over top of that and saying, based on these numbers, based on what we're seeing in the predictive workflows, where do we need to increase or decrease the amount of changes? How do we then communicate that to the agent who does order fulfillment? That used to be a human being looking across multiple different kinds of spreadsheets, multiple different systems. The agents are there to work together to bring some of the complexity out, improve the efficiency, and then give that back with a human who's overseeing that work. And some of those gains there are really impressive. We've started to see things like 30% increases in order fulfillment and at a 40% decrease in the overall sort of stock housing costs of extra inventory sitting on the shelves for too long. And that's our aspiration, is to make sure all companies are starting to work across that flow. You'll see productivity gains. We will see ongoing transformation. That true sort of transformation takes place when you have all 3 of those opportunities realized inside the firm.
Let's turn our focus to kind of the guidance that we can offer folks about how to successfully implement AI and agentic applications. First, could you share maybe an example of a customer who measured a meaningful business outcome from their AI implementation?
I might give you 2 because the first one that always comes to mind for us is Microsoft. Our own best customers, we get tons and tons of calls from customers, from everything about Xbox logins to changing their Windows application to understanding why their Surface laptop is not working. We're able to quickly sift through all of those issues, but the game changer has been the existing platform, been built on a Power App. How are we able to sort of assistance for those call center folks? We now have a set of agents that are able to classify exactly what type of issue it is, match it to the right human being. They're provided the latest information on any of the common outages, challenges that we're facing in that space. They're able to get on the phone fully confident that they know exactly what is going on. It has really helped the efficiency of folks in those call centers. That assistive technology was able to take an average person going from about 100 calls a day to 300 calls a day. That's a pretty big increase in what a human being is able to do. And that's because they're able to more easily dispatch and resolve those calls with a happy customer. And that's the second thing, which I get super excited about. Efficiency is what we should largely expect from agents and AI. You don't always think of human satisfaction in the space, but we should. Our callers, they weren't waiting on the phone as long. They got more pertinent information. They were talking to somebody that was able to cut directly to the chase. That is a really exciting sort of value. Flip to the other side, we have seen in that industrial IoT space, large-scale manufacturers operating heavy industry equipment. They have had sensors on them forever. But those sensors have typically fed into an application. There's lots of data. There's very little insight. Introduce agents that can quickly make sense and build out insights. And that customer is able to take that existing infrastructure, the work that they had already built on Power Platform to automate processes and have agents go through to start to make the predictive maintenance decisions. What they've seen is about $50 million cost savings just in the first factory they implemented alone. And they're also able to see quite a bit of improvement in terms of efficiency in servicing those. No longer do you have a single person checking the spreadsheet or checking all of the sensors, and you're able to precision pinpoint. That's sort of the next frontier of that is when we're able to start to take human intelligence on those systems, combine it with an agent that's able to reason over data and to make a recommendation that is then able to be followed.
We're talking about AI, but we're also talking about the human element. What are the cultural or team structural changes that are effective or essential for scaling AI?
This is probably the most critical question, and that's an easy thing to say. What we've seen is largely learned through what Microsoft has gone through. We know that for the culture to be in place, you have to start with security and governance, really starting with understanding. You've got to make sure that people have a bit of psychological safety with the information being disclosed. You also build psychological safety with the fact that there is a future for humans in all of these work streams. When we talk about the frontier firm, there's not an instance where there is not a human being involved in those processes. It becomes question of how can you build trust in the data that's being provided so you feel like it's assistive and additive. There are also organizational protocols that are really important. That also goes back to security and governance, but it also goes to some level of explainability. We talk a lot about evaluations. We talk a lot about benchmarks. That's not just to make the products better. It's also to really make sure that if you're trusting an agent to run a part of your business, you want to see some type of performance report, the same way that you want to see that from an individual employee. Are they doing their job? Are they learning over time? And that's why we've put a lot of focus into things like agent observability, the ability to run that through the governance center, and Power Automate. We've had this as part of the core of that product for a long time, something that we've built in throughout. So it really starts with trust from the individual, trust in the process, and then trust in making sure that you have some level of observability into that process to continue to make it better.
Michelle, let's talk about Power Platform and the role that it plays in simplifying multi-agent orchestration across different modalities like chat, apps, backend systems, and also how we interact with that, because agents are a little different than how they have to be managed.
It's a great question. It's one that I am really glad you asked, because we are getting lots of questions about what is the future of Power Platform and apps and what is the future of agents. And the answer is they are better together. Agents interacting with different applications inside the business through the work that we've already done inside Power Platform tends to be the ticket to success. In fact, some of our biggest customers, we have seen Power Platform power users have become the fastest adopters of Copilot Studio and Agents because that DNA is already there. We have built the Maker platform, the ability for observability, as well as the data feeds. And so that's really the fast pass towards AI. The organizations that have already taken the time to organize data, secure the data, figure out the right identities, and have the right systems in place to manage across are going to be the first. And certainly some of our biggest users have done this, from oil and gas all the way to financial services, have used Power App and Power Platform as the jumping off point for their agents. And they started with those agents attached directly to those apps as really sort of the people that are at the forefront of that frontier firm curve.
It's really intriguing, the agent feed. Tell us more about that and how that works.
Agent feed is one of our secret weapons as AI adoption rolls out across the organization. What agent feed does is that it provides that level of observability into both the application and the agent interactions. So you're able to see agents, you're able to see the interaction of how that agent is interacting with all of your data sources, as well as the interaction with the application. And that's super important because it is the way that we can continue to have the human element. We're making sure those agents are making the right decisions, that they're picking from the right data sources, and we're able to continue to make sure they are getting better at their jobs. That is something we feed back into all of the work inside our engineering teams, part of both a continuous process loop. It's also something that the makers and the creators and the owners inside the business can take to make sure that we're working on the highest order problems, that they're finding the right solutions and moving really quickly.
How does agentic automation reshape the way applications are designed, deployed, even delivered, built, especially by end users?
Already, we've seen a great adoption of Power Platform, but it's still been a relatively IT-driven activity. We have lots of different types of makers, but when it comes to an application that is widely used through an organization, that is still largely more in the technical space. The intersection of these two trends, though, really start to open up the door for everyone. My background is 100% in sales and marketing. I've built 3 agents that are now working with one of the Power applications we have on our dashboard. It has really changed the ability for folks to think about a problem, identify sort of what the parameters of that problem would need to be, identify some data sources, and move pretty quickly to get that done. So in my case, we are going from multiple meetings where we have multiple different asks. How do we synthesize those, and how do an app is running and tracking our feedback? I no longer have to send a bunch of emails out to the field telling them that's what's happening. The agents are collecting it. They're updating the information the app is tracking. We've just given access to that. I am just one example. We see many organizations with which we're working right now of where you have someone who is able to identify a problem that's common to the rest of the organization, find a solution, and get it out pretty quick. And the beautiful thing about that interrelationship between Power Platform and that agent maker space is that it's not just someone off doing something that then gets stuck. But when you're using that defined identity group, you can go from a single maker to widespread adoption. And that's the curve that we see. Can everybody create, and can everybody create a solution that is common to many and being used in a sort of exponential effect?
You talked about end user builders creating applications. We've been doing that, right, with technology platforms that we've had up to this point. But you said something really interesting about going beyond what we're capable of doing today, building agents, never imagining that was something to do. Talk about what that looks like, what that future, what's possible for the end users in a world where they don't have to go to IT for everything.
Yes, and I would be in big trouble if I cut my IT friends out. But I think there is a place where in the right sort of culture dimensions, you've already defined the identity groups, you defined the problem, and you've been able to put the parameters around security. So really being very clear about which information sources to pull from. That part is also something that used to be a pretty complex task requiring a lot of negotiation. When we do that now in this environment, we're able to either rely on existing identity groups and security protocols that are native in Power Platform, or we're able to really quickly give that direction to an agent by saying, please only pull from these types of things. So for example, if you're using Researcher, you can say, please only pull from our internal work documents. As we think about widespread adoption, it is really shortening the curve to creation and then being able to demonstrate value. That is the key crux. IT professionals usually care about system access and the system identity pieces because that's what makes sure that nothing crashes. They also care about usage, making sure we start with security in mind and then we solve that most repeatable use case tends to be the thing that has enabled makers to create and then IT to love the stuff.
When we talk about builders, you might imagine starting completely from scratch, but we're really not. We have a lot of things in place that IT has put in place and also that are built into kind of the fabric of the tools, the capabilities. Talk about that a little bit, Michelle.
Yeah. And when I talk about identity management, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Entra and the many things that we have built in to that. So when we think about defined identity, it's why starting with Power Platform is that shortcut. In many cases, we've defined through Entra what the IDs are. We have also defined group identities. We define rules for what those different groups can access, what they cannot access, and at what times. And so it becomes very easy and it gives an extra level of trust. I'm really excited about the continuing investments that Microsoft is making here. That core strength of what we've had in Power Platform is joined by things like Purview, Agent 365, that is that control plane for agents.
This is a great time to be in technology, but be in business where we're able to leverage AI. Thanks for sharing your insights, some of the learnings that you've had working with customers, even your own as you're building agents. So we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thanks so much, Mitch. Appreciate it.
One of the things that's most interesting to me about AI is not only what we can do with it, but how it's changed about how we think we can solve problems and who can solve those problems. We've had citizen developers and tools for creating applications in business units and outside of IT and situations where they still need to come to IT to kind of get the harder parts done. And it seems like we're passing that. We're moving past some of those barriers into a world where some of the constraints around what we can do with technology are being lifted or lessened of a burden on the end users. And that's when things change. That's when systems fundamentally change because you remove constraints and now what's possible is actually even increased the space of what you can do. It's really interesting to see how Microsoft has approached this of having an embedded base of customers that are using the current generation, if you will, of technologies, but helping them move into this agentic future. And it's not a jump off the deep end. It's a process to move through that, but also helping customers understand what you can do and who can do that and how to leverage those tools, while at the same time, security guardrails, governance, the things that you need from a corporate or an enterprise standpoint, not are checkpoints at the end, but also built in to the processes and tools that you have so you can start to leverage that as well. It's really exciting to think about the future of agents and what they can do as we moved into the second and third phases that Michelle talked about around agents doing work for us and then working along agents. I kind of think of it as not just humans in the loop, but humans leading the loop of agents that are doing that work for us. So it's an exciting future. And I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to share our experiences along the way on this journey.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with John Aisien, who's the Senior Vice President for Central Product Management at ServiceNow. And well, now that the deal between them and Veza has been closed, well, we're going to have a little chat about identity management and all this stuff and where it fits in the age of AI. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think early on when this deal was first announced, a lot of people were skeptical. They were kind of felt like, well, what does identity management got to do with ITSM and everything else that ServiceNow does? But here we are, flash forward a few months later, and now everybody's gone, wow, this looks pretty savvy, because essentially AI and AI agents are a new type of identity we need to manage. They're a persona, essentially, right?
That's exactly right, Mike. I mean, we, for the entirety of our over 20 years as an enterprise software vendor, we've established ourselves as one of the de facto asset intelligence providers for organizations. So if you want control over your software assets, your hardware assets, any other form of asset, you generally partner with ServiceNow, especially at the sort of high end of the market. It's a very natural extension even to then want visibility initially, and then over time control over who has access to those assets. And in the world of agentic and system-to-system interaction, also what has access to those assets. So for us, it's a very natural extension to evolve from a world of providing asset intelligence to a world of providing asset and access intelligence. And it's that second dimension, access intelligence, that Veza uniquely powers.
How did you wind up picking these folks? I mean, it seems like already there's a lot of players in the category, and is it a category or is it going to be just melded into the core platform?
I think it's both to start with. I'll answer the second question first. It is a category. There is a category called identity security. There's a number of large cap and small cap participants that play in that market. Customers have also rolled their own tremendously, inclusive, Mike, on ServiceNow. So as part of the diligence that we performed, we were actually astounded to find the number of organizations, including actually a Fortune 10 organization that had built an access intelligence as well as an access governance application on ServiceNow using our sort of custom workload builder, which is an essential part of ServiceNow. And that, again, was another source of signal that told us that we had brand permission and essentially technical permission to participate in this market. But then to directly answer your question, we will also be incorporating core subsets of Veza that make sense, specifically that access graph, into our overall platform capabilities, such that other workloads built on ServiceNow can take advantage of that access graph, even if those workloads are not native ServiceNow workloads. So that's essentially a part of our future direction of travel.
How should we think about AI agents? Because a lot of folks would say, well, it's my AI agent, therefore it will inherit whatever permissions I granted, and it should just be managed as an extension of me. But I also feel like there's starting to emerge these somewhat semi-autonomous AI agents that are performing a task on behalf of an organization that, well, I'm not clear who's responsible for those.
Yeah, so to us, the answer is both. And it would depend on the workload. It would depend on the prevalent security and other forms of policy that apply for the organization. So in summary, our capabilities all up enable AI workloads of all sorts to inherit human identities and then gain from the pre-validated, pre-curated sets of permissions that have been associated with those human identities. That's one modality that we could see. But if you look at our AI specialist construct, actually a set of announcements that we made in February of this year, an AI specialist is essentially a digital human that gets trained the way a physical sentient human gets trained, gets associated with policies and permissions, and gets associated with knowledge. That's part of the training, and in itself requires its own identity, and that identity then benefits from incremental permissions in specific systems. And by the way, Mike, some of those permissions are ephemeral. The permissions may last 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or perhaps even microseconds. So in that context, it's super important to have the ability to manage these agentic workloads as their own distinct identities, or where it makes sense to associate their identities with existing human identities. And the flexibility of our architecture allows us to support both models.
Will this also become like the attack vector of choice now? Because the bad guys will be sitting out there going, well, these things have awesome amounts of permissions, and we're really adept at stealing credentials, so we'll just steal the credentials of the AI agent and away we go.
Yes. Yes. Well, bear in mind, we are, the capabilities that we've acquired from Veza and that we're integrating into ServiceNow is an admin time construct. So, Mike, this is a who has access to what has access to what, who should have access to what should have access to what. Those are representations of the kind of value that Veza provides. When one wants to make a runtime access request, so Mike literally wants to access a system right now, an AI agent wants to update a clearing and settlement system right now, the subsets of the identity stack that power that are provided by partner organizations. We are not in that business right now. Now, hey, we'll see where the future takes us as we continue to perform research and then develop against that research in this sort of early innings of the platform shift that we're going through. But as things stand right now, that capability, think about it as an IDP, is capability that partner solutions provide as opposed to ServiceNow.
Right, because there's one thing to provision the AI agent, managing it during its post-provisioning cycle is a whole other day two motion, right?
That's exactly right. So the sort of constant change, and that's why those two examples that I gave earlier of the AI agent inheriting human identities and permissions, and the AI agents having their own distinct identities and permissions are so important. The ability to support those, I think, both, excuse me, speak to the specific point that you just made.
I think it's fair to say that maybe we're seeing a little irrational exuberance when it comes to deploying AI, or in a lot of organizations, we're ahead of our skis, as it were. Do you think at some point auditors are going to come around and start asking some interesting questions about, well, what are these things accessing and how and why and who said so?
They're already doing that. And of course, I'll have to respect customer confidentiality. But this morning, Mike, I was on a call at 6 a.m. with an Italian financial services firm. I won't say any more, but the primary premise that drove the deputy CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, Mike, to reach out to us and ostensibly perhaps other providers was exactly that. There was essentially an audit finding, and he did not articulate if this was an internal or an external audit finding. But there was an audit finding nonetheless that required them to demonstrate tamper-proof, non-repudiatable evidence that they had control over both coarse-grained permissions. So what do the agents and the service accounts have rights to access? But also fine-grained permissions. What are the specific CRUD operations that these agents can perform in different forms of target systems? And so that was the basis of a conversation that we started this morning with a specific organization, and we'll see where that goes. And incidentally, Mike, we were already participating in conversations of this sort, even pre-Veza, because in that instance, we'll be describing how our asset intelligence will power a subset of the data that they need. But now that we're in both the asset intelligence and the access intelligence business, we believe that at least on paper, we are very well positioned to meet the entirety of the needs that this audit finding has placed on this organization.
How dynamic are these AI agents likely to be? Because I think we had trouble just keeping up with the humans, and in comparison, they're relatively static. But it seems like with AI agents, we may be not only provisioning new ones constantly, but also ripping and replacing the old ones.
Yeah, but also the workloads themselves, the agentic workloads themselves, can self-request incremental access, at least on paper. They can step up permissions in a system they already have access to. They can execute on both the system and the human tasks necessary to change access privileges. Again, on paper. I believe for enterprise AI to evolve to true full-blown ubiquity, for this platform shift to become truly mainstream, and I do believe that it will happen. In other words, these forms of workload will become mainstream. It's a matter of sort of when, not if. But I believe one of the anchor pillars necessary for this platform shift to evolve from, kind of scale experimentation, which is where I would argue we are today, to true mainstream adoption, one of the pillars that need to be put in place is a pillar that addresses exactly what you just described, which is when reasoning determines that an agentic workload needs incremental permissions, how do you ensure that the permissions that are granted are still consistent with internal policy and external regulation, even as those policies and regulations themselves continue to remain dynamic? That is an unsolved problem for the industry as a whole, and we expect to play a role in solving that problem through a combination of existing IP, future IP that we may develop, and very importantly, the incremental talent that we're adding to ServiceNow through organic hiring and some of these inorganic transactions that we've announced.
So, what are you seeing, even though it's still early days, people doing today that maybe will come to regret tomorrow?
Man, people have always done things that, look, I'll give a philosophical answer. clearly there are some absolutely hard guardrails, constraints that we as organizations need to align behind. There's a difference between a rule, an explicit thou must not, and I expect folks, even in this era of agentic, to stay on the right side of such, sort of Boolean rules. But on that right side of those Boolean rules is sort of multiple shades of gray. And in that world, I expect the combination of customers enabling providers like ours, third-party enabling providers, and many of whom we compete with, but we also cooperate with, to execute on the right forms of experimentation that enables, I'll call it rapid iterative learning. It's almost like agentic AI terrain grabbing, and you're grabbing that terrain to solve business problems, but also to rapidly learn. It's no different, Mike, than the previous platform shifts that, we've all been through in the past. Client server to web, web to cloud, the emergence of mobile as a dominant ergonomic form factor. We went through a comparable iterative learning cycle through those previous shifts, and I don't see why this should be any different, as long as, again, we stay on the right side of those Boolean rules and regulations that exist for a reason.
I might argue that historically we've been kind of lazy in this space in this regard. When we hired somebody, we set them up and we would say they need access to X, Y, and Z. And then we'd be like, oh, yeah, and they might someday need access to these 10 other things. And so we gave them access to that early on. And I wonder if we're in danger of doing the same thing with AI agents that are going to be much more voracious in their desire and enthusiasm for accessing data, and maybe, all kinds of havoc might ensue.
Yeah, including malfeasance. Yeah, so that danger is real, Mike, period. And I think it's our job to collectively defend against that danger. Like, I really do mean that. I take my responsibilities as one of the custodians of ServiceNow's go-forward security strategy very seriously. I don't expect to be able to solve problems of the ilk you described exclusively on my own. I think customers and frankly governments and society as a whole has an implicit expectation that we will collaborate with other asset providers, even if those asset providers are primarily competitive, to sort of come together to collectively defend against the threats that you're describing. The defenders are doing that, by the way. They're collaborating on the deep dark web. They're sharing tools, techniques, procedures. They're sharing code. They're sharing data. So we are at an inherent disadvantage if we don't fully imbibe authentically the importance of collectively defending. No single vendor can be best in class at everything. We believe we're best in class across the asset intelligence dimension. Veza has given us an astounding leg up around access intelligence, but we're not necessarily best in class at endpoint usage intelligence or NetFlow or digital exhaust that arises from CSPM. Sorry to use an acronym, but Cloud Security Posture Management. We're not. We participate in those markets, but I wouldn't argue that we're best in class in any of those. It's our job, literally a hard responsibility, to partner with those vendors that are best in class in those representative categories to ensure that we can define a collective defense architecture that makes sense for our customers for this emerging age of agentic.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it here. Even before the arrival of AI agents, we were saying that identity is the new perimeter. What's changing here is that perimeter is not looking like anything we ever saw before. John, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity to bond with you and your listeners. Cheers.
Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. We're just, about 2 weeks out, maybe even less than 2 weeks, a week and a half out from our annual pilgrimage to San Francisco where the cybersecurity meets cybersecurity industry meets to talk cyber. RSA. The RSA conference is something I've been going to for 25 years. We put on every year our DevSecOps event there on Monday. We'll be doing it this year again. This year it's on securing AI native dev, and it should be a good one. And of course, we'll be on Broadcast Alley all week streaming live. One of the other really can't miss things at RSA every year has become the Innovation Sandbox. I think this is the 20 or 21st year for the Innovation Sandbox. And, if you look at the roster, not just of the ones, the one company that wins every year, but if you look at the roster of the 10 finalists that get picked every year, I mean, it's a who's who of the security industry in terms of some of these companies. I mean, just yesterday, Google announced that the transaction with Wiz closed, and Wiz was one of the Sandbox finalists. I don't think they won. I think they were just a finalist. Anyway, let me introduce you to one of the finalists from this year. They might win, who knows, but certainly one of the finalists. I want to introduce you to Itamar Apelblat. Itamar is the CEO and co-founder of Token Security. Itamar, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you on here. My pleasure. So we're going to talk about Token, but first let's talk about you. Give us your story if you don't mind.
All right. So I founded the company together with Ido, my co-founder, and he's the CTO of the company 2.5 years ago. We're old friends. So I know him for 16 years. So we both joined the military service together. We both served in the A200 unit. And from the first day, he literally taught me how to tie my army boots. So we are really good friends. I grew up in Tel Aviv and started my career in cybersecurity when I was 18, so 16 years ago, and loved it ever since. So I joined the team that was in charge of securing the infrastructure and the data of the unit. And that was such an exciting thing to do back in the days, because back in 2009 we seen what we could have done, and then we understand there's so many threats. This unit is being targeted by literally nations, right? So
Sure.
So I learned so much during this time, and the CISO of the unit, he was my commander, so I had to do whatever he told me to do by law, basically. And we grew very fast. So from a team of 20 engineers, we became 200. So I grew up with that team and became an R&D group leader. So led few R&D teams, building, basically I had unlimited resources to solve whatever problem I cared about in the cyberspace. And there were some really complex issues, and a lot of them was in the space of identity. So I have a lot of passion to what we're doing here in token security. And yeah, so I did it for 10 years, then founded my own startup, had some success with it. It was in the fintech space. And we founded Token about 2.5 years ago. And about a year ago, I moved to New York. So I survived my first winter here.
Congratulations on that. Spring is coming. Well, first you're going to get through April. You know what they say in New York? April showers bring May flowers. It rains a lot. It rains a lot in April, but it's all good. At least it's not snow. Good for you. So is your co-founder also in New York, or?
No, so he's in Tel Aviv. So our entire engineering and product is in Tel Aviv. And our go-to-market functions are in the US, spread across the entire state.
Excellent. Very cool. So talk to us, Itamar. It's a great story. I have a lot of friends from Israeli cybersecurity companies, no surprise. And, this is sort of a common path we see, right? They go in 80-200. Some are doing offensive work. Some are purely defense. I mean, you're the first person I've spoken to who actually had to defend the unit, right? But an interesting way to really learn, right? I mean, talk about getting thrown into the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly. So Ido and I is really the yin and yang of the unit. So he was in the offensive and he became branch commander. So he was leading hundreds of security researchers. And he also saw that the identity is usually the easiest path in, right? So we both came from a different direction. And I think that my experience as someone that building security products from such an early age was understanding that there's so many risks that the organization and the CISO need to face, right? And it's all about prioritization and how to become a business enabler. Because there's no organization in the world that their job is to protect themselves, right? There's always a bigger outcome than that. So learn a lot during this time.
I'm sure. There's no doubt. Let's talk a little bit about identity, right? So I've always felt if cloud security had a killer app, it was IAD, right? Identity and access control. IAC, excuse me, IAC. But identity, you know, as things get more complicated or sophisticated, so do our identity issues become more complicated and sophisticated. So, when we first started with cloud security, identity was about human identity, people's identity, cloud native, containerization, kube, all of these things. And all of a sudden, we started worrying about the identity of virtual machines, the identity of containers, the identity of non-human assets. And we had APIs, right? All of a sudden now, API security became, the hot thing. We gotta understand what APIs we have out there. Are they locked down? What's their configuration? We almost needed to have sort of an identity of API sort of thing. Now, of course, the rage is AI agents, agentic AI. They also need to have identities. We see it here at Techstrong with my own people experimenting. Talk to us about how that kind of progression of identity has manifested into token security.
Yeah. So actually a funny story when we started the company, we saw that identity is pretty much broken because we saw so many identity solutions that are focused, that are human centric, right? And you have
Right.
some amazing leaders that are solving this problem and haven't really changed in the past 20, 30 years. But then, as you shared, there's so many new innovations, and we see that the robust, uh, the largest amount of identities are those non-human. And a funny story was that I was actually called back for reserve duty in the unit that I was serving at, and they gave me this, third-party contractor account, and I was starting to do my job, and then I tried to log into a system, and I couldn't. So I asked for permissions, right? It's super bureaucratic. I waited and waited, literally, sitting in my chair, getting paid from the taxpayers to do nothing. So I was super frustrated. And then I tried to log in through a service account that I created back in the day, 6 years before. And because I remember the password, it was a funny password. We were young soldiers back then. So try to log in, and all of a sudden I was an admin in one of the most secure networks in the entire world, right?
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Then I asked my friends, why they didn't change the password? Why they didn't rotate it?
Why did they just kill your account?
Yeah. And then they said they were scared. They didn't know who's using that service, who is using this user, which applications are dependent on that. And in that moment we said, okay, there is a big problem here that was overlooked for so long. Then there was a new transition that happened in the world, and that's that right now every organization is racing to adopt AI, right? And very early on, we understand that adopting AI, the promise of it is not just a chatbot that answering questions, right? It's agentic AI. It's agents that take actions, that write software, that solve problems, right? So we were trying to understand, okay, what's the risk over there? And very early on, you understand that the agent risk is based on the level of access that they have into your business application and the level of autonomy. And I think this is a new class of identity we have to secure because it's all about the identity. So about 2 years ago, we started to tackle this agent identity space that grew very fast, and we see now organization having so many challenges on even knowing about those identities and then understanding the owners and which applications are connected. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. And what I love about it is that adoption of AI is a must now, and AI agents is such an exciting technology, and we live in such an exciting time, and it's great to be part of a solution that helps organization to actually adopt it in a secure way, right? So I have a lot of passion about that.
As you should, right? I've never met a successful founder, co-founder who doesn't have passion about what they do. They don't have passion. So, I was talking to a friend of mine, called me this morning. He's a money manager, financial, planner, asking me a question about AI and how real it is and whether I'm using it here whatsoever. And I told him, I live in a world where what I used to measure in months and years, I measure in hours and days. That's how fast things are changing, right? It's just crazy. I thought what we went through in November and December was earth shattering. Like stuff got real in around November, December, the latest iterations that came out of AI then. But then the whole OpenClaw thing and the agentics, the last month, I feel like we did 5 years in the last month. Um, it's got to be. I am imagine from where you sit, it's a very similar thing, right? Okay, I mean the mission hasn't changed. You still want to lock down identities, right? You still want to make identity control, uh, feasible, doable, simple as possible. But it's just, you know, what's going on in the world is it's got to be. I don't know if it's terrifying, exhilarating, a little of both.
I think it is a little of both. Every CISO that I'm speaking with is sharing that their board, their CIOs, CTOs are really right now pushing AI because they see how fast you can innovate, um, you can excel, solve problems, but many don't understand exactly what does that mean and how does it look in a good and in an enterprise in a secure way. So um I completely agree with that. And when you think about agent and agent identity, it's a new class of identities, right? We cannot treat it as our human employees or even as our machines, because it's a mix of both. It has the flexibility of being unpredictable. It's non-deterministic, right? It doesn't follow any script, but it's taking it in a much greater action and scale, just like service accounts and machines identities. So it's an interesting mesh. And what we understand is that in order to secure this new type of identity, you really need to understand the purpose, the intent of the agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you understand what this agent meant to do, what those actions are actually, what's the reason for those actions, then you can start to restrict their access, manage their life cycle, enforce your policies. Um, Today, it's a bit tough to organization to understand how organization adopting AI, but that will be the next step, is understanding also the actual use case of those agents, and then create a much more tailor-made experience and security processes for that.
Got it. Got it. Um, let's get, if you don't mind, Itamar, I want to dig a little deeper into token itself, into token security itself. And what a great name, right? For a company that's working on AI, agent identity risk, token's a good name. Good choice there. how are you doing this? Like, let's, our audience is a technical audience. How are you doing this?
Yeah, so we basically, because we understand that agents are, the risk of an agent is based on the level of access they have and to which business applications. So basically, our philosophy was, first of all, we don't want to create latency or stop the organization from adopting AI or create friction. So we are creating a seamless experience by just integrating to both sides. So we have integrations into your business critical applications, over hundreds of different integrations, where we map all the identities that can interact with those resources. And on the other hand, we have integration to all of those AI applications where the agencies are running from, whether it's locally in your own computer or through different SaaS applications or different engines. And then we connect the two. We look at the agents and their activity, configuration, skills, ownership, and also look at what the actions are they doing and well. Once you connect those two, because this is a data problem, then you can start to analyze the intent of the agent and enforce your policy. So for example, if you want using token, you can say, hey, I want that OpenClaw will only run in this department. Any other installation, I don't want it to have it. But in that department, I only want to connect it into sandbox applications in this and that cloud resources. Today, you can't do that. You don't know which OpenClaw instances you have. You don't know what they're connected to, what's their mission. So with token, you can do that by us connecting to those two sides of the interactions.
Excellent. Excellent. I wish we could show people, but this isn't set up for that kind of demo. Itamar, we're probably overtime already, and I don't want to ignore the whole sandbox thing. We got to mention it, right? Token is one of the 10 finalists this year for the Innovation Sandbox. The last couple of years, things have changed, right? Now you've got basically they put aside about $50 million in venture capital, 5 million per finalist, uh, available to you for being chosen one of the 10. Talk about what it was like applying and then making it to the finals.
Yeah. The application wasn't easy. We got ready. We worked really well on the presentation, created videos, and when we heard the news, I remember Christian and Raz from or leading our marketing team were like trying to look again, try to understand if it's us or not, because this is probably one of the most iconic events in cybersecurity and probably in the entire startup ecosystem. So we were so honored to be part of it. I remember me going to RSA, my first RSA, and looking in people in the stage. This is a great group to be a part of.
Yeah, it is. You're in what's the word I'm looking for? You're in like very high company, right? Very distinguished company. Good for
Yeah.
you. And then, of course, the Innovation Sandbox on Monday of RSA week. I want to say it's the 22nd, March 22nd. I think is that Monday on the second floor there. You'll be presenting to a panel of VCs and dignitaries, and then, of course, the winner will be announced. You know what we didn't mention, Itamar? What's the website for token security?
It's token.security.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, I wish you the best of luck going into the sandbox. But you know what they say, like in the Miss America pageant, you're all winners already. You made the finalists. You already won. Whether you actually win the one who wins it or not, you already are a winner for it. So congratulations on what you've built and what you're doing. Continued success. We'll be live all week there. Well, Monday we put on our event, actually right in the room above you, on the third floor. And but the rest of the week we're there on Broadcast Alley doing videos. Come by and say hello.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. And also come to our booth and check it out.
I'll be honest, I do one quick pass of that floor and get the hell out of there. It's so overwhelming.
I know.
You know what? I camp out by my broadcast alley booth there, and people come talk to me. It's too much. And the other thing is, it takes me. I mean, I'm going to RSA 25 years. It takes me a long time to say hello to everyone and get around that floor. But anyway, again, congratulations. Best of luck with Token.
Thank you so much.
This sounds like something we need. So good job there, man. All righty.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Itamar Apelblat, CEO, co-founder of Token Security, one of this year's Innovation Sandbox finalists here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
This week, we consider the announcements from MWC in Barcelona and pre-GTC announcements from around the enterprise AI industry. This episode of Utilizing AI features Nick Patience, Brad Shimon, and myself, Stephen Foskett from the Futurum Group, discussing this globe-spanning conference, no longer just focused on telecom. We also talk about neoclouds following the incredible $2 billion funding round secured by Nscale, perhaps Europe's largest funding round ever. We then turn to the current impracticality of local models for most users and finish with what we're looking forward to at GTC. Welcome to Utilizing AI, the podcast focused on practical applications of artificial intelligence from the Futurum Group. Every Wednesday, we explore news and use cases of the ways in which AI is transforming enterprise IT and the industries it serves. I'm your host, Stephen Foskett, president of the Tech Field Day business unit here at Futurum. And before we dive into this discussion, let's meet who's on the panel today. Brad?
Hi, everyone. Brad Shimon. I am the VP Practice Lead for Data Intelligence Analytics and Infrastructure at Futurum. And as you imagine, I like data. I like AI.
Hi, I'm Nick Patience. I'm the AI Platforms Practice Lead, so I get to focus on the things that are unique about AI.
Absolutely. And of course, we've got a bunch of other great folks that you've seen here on the podcast, and hopefully some more folks from Futurum will be joining us in the coming weeks. Note to listeners, I know that GTC is going on this week as you're hearing this, but we are actually recording this the previous week, so we will be covering that in the future. But everything we're saying here is not yet defined by the earth-shaking announcements that you are probably, maybe, could be hearing this week. Instead, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about some of the news as we know it the week before GTC. And that is going to be, I guess, headlined by what came out of Mobile World Congress, MWC. Now, one of the ways that AI is affecting all of us is that it is, I was going to say infecting, but it is appearing everywhere. And Mobile World Congress is unique because it is both an enterprise conference as well as almost in a consumer edge environment, because you do see a lot of things that we don't always cover here. Nick, let me throw it to you first. Talk to me a little bit about what AI-related tech did you see at Mobile World Congress, and what did you think of it?
Yeah, Stephen, you're right. It is a kind of combination. It's one of these shows throughout the year that's, I mean, not quite on the scale of GTC, but in terms of that has become a kind of you need to go to shows. Whether you're, the mobile name and the word at the beginning is now slightly misleading. It's becoming a bit more kind of general purpose. So yeah, I'm not a particularly, I don't get particularly excited about phones. So I wasn't like going around figuring out who's got the latest models and things like that. I was there focused on AI as ever, and I think there's a few things that jumped out at me. So sovereignty, sovereign AI is a key part of my coverage, and I think there was a lot of focus on that. There was a big announcement from Telefonica on that, and there was various panels. I went to one with Telefonica CEO, Deutsche Telekom CEO, and a couple of others, and it was kind of like European sovereignty in a microcosm. There was a lot of why can't we all just get along and do things? Why do we have to have 27 different countries focus on 27 different things type message? So it's quite similar. I hadn't been to MWC for about a dozen years. And last time I went was probably, 5G is around on the horizon. Now 6G is on the horizon. And there was still kind of bickering about the same kind of things, but also promising pretty much the same things, that 5G was going to change the nature of operators. And it's not just about phones. It could do all sorts of things. Remember the Internet of Things was supposed to be based on 5G. What happened to that, you may ask? And now 6G is coming along, and this kind of sounding pretty similar. Now, that's not to say that the AI has not moved along massively since then. Obviously it has. We all know that. But so I think there's a lot of opportunities for European telcos to some extent. I don't overplay this. Take on the US hyperscalers. They certainly see themselves in that role. And then that's where obviously the chip companies come in, like Nvidia, the equipment makers like Nokia and Ericsson, and all the software layers are all kind of like buzzing around this, trying to see where to place their bets. So I think there's there was a lot of cool things there. There was some of the stands there were just out of this world in terms of the production values. It's not like any other show I've ever really been to in terms of that, the amount of money that is lavished on this. And there were huge presence from China. All the kind of Chinese hardware companies of all kind of stripes you can imagine were there. But also the likes of Qualcomm and Nokia and Ericsson and others had big shows, and then every country basically is represented. You go, there's the British stand, there's the Estonian stand, there's the Argentinian stand, and so it's an interesting mix of core technology, interesting AI stuff which is quite cutting edge, telco stuff which sometimes doesn't feel quite as cutting edge, and then geopolitics all wrapped in. So it was quite an experience.
Yeah, actually, I stand corrected. I just looked it up, and indeed, it's just MWC now. It's not Mobile World Congress. Reminds me of RSA. The former RSA conference is now just RSAC. I guess GTC is just GTC. We're postmodern now. Things don't stand for other things. But you're right. It has always been such a cool conference because of the telecom angle. It does always bring in a lot of international flavor. And that is, I'm sure, a refreshing gust of fresh air to people who are tired of hearing this sort of Silicon Valley-focused narrative around all this stuff. Brad, what is your impression?
Well, first and foremost, it is a sight to behold, this conference. And any conference that has people movers built in has to be big. It's like its own airport, if you will. But I think as you said, Stephen and Nick both, telecom plays a big role here, and it is so a lot of people boring compared to shiny new toys. But it is, I think, also very heartening to see these vendors looking to extend their role. I mean, yes, a lot of the news coming out of the show from the telecom providers was the shocking realization that AI might help them to optimize, automate, and streamline their networks to increase value and performance. That's their job. But they seem to be quite aware of the fact that innovation happens everywhere, and so much so, I think it was shocking to me a little bit to see just how much that's played out on the mobile device part of this spectrum, end of the spectrum. Because what was it? There was trying to think of the name of it now. There was a phone that actually had a little pop-up camera on it that would a robot camera. They actually called it was Honor's robot phone, and it would actually dance for you and follow you around the room as I guess you practiced your TikTok video dance sessions, whatever it's built for. But my goodness, I think the funk, the strangeness was certainly on display at the device end, with AI really serving to drive a lot of that innovation.
Yeah, I actually was in one of the kind of mini keynote sessions where the Honor CEO was showing that one. It was some of it felt like incredibly innovative there. Some of it also felt like, remember when we used to add cameras to phones? It kind of looked a bit like that, except obviously it moves and it follows you around, and things like that. A couple other things I think stood out. I guess there was when I talked earlier about the telcos positioning themselves as AI infrastructure providers, I don't want to kind of knock it as kind of irrelevant, because I don't think it is. It's not only the telcos, but it's obviously all their suppliers. So obviously NVIDIA is pushing the telcos in that direction. I had a really interesting show floor tour with the person who runs she's sort of GM for marketing for telcos for NVIDIA, and we were going around Nokia, Ericsson, the big kind of companies, but also some of these much smaller providers that are taking like DGX Spark boxes and building base stations for very little money. I mean, we're not talking six-figure amounts here. We're talking very little money, and it almost kind of reminds me, not being too tasteless about it, it's kind of drones versus very expensive missiles, and it's kind of a similar thing. They're very disruptive. Those DGX Spark boxes from NVIDIA, which are quite disruptive in that world. And I think Cisco was talking about inferencing grids. In some of the I went to a kind of private session with the CEO of Cisco and a few of the executives there, which can't go into too much detail, but they're obviously talking about how important their stack is. And NVIDIA, Nokia framed this as a kind of AI super cycle, where obviously the data is much more bursty in telecommunications, and then in agentic, it will be much more bursty as well. So they think they have a play there. And then finally, I think we hear a lot from Jensen Huang of NVIDIA and others about physical AI. And this show, I think, that's the direction it will, partly go in. Obviously, there will always be the consumer play around the phones, but I think this is again where Nokia was talking about the traffic differences and things like that. NVIDIA had kind of partnerships with SK Telecom of South Korea, BT, NTT Docomo, and this is where obviously 6G, and going back to my point about 6G and the great promise of it, it's, I guess, for IoT with 5G, you think physical AI with 6G. I think that's the pitch.
Yeah, like you said, Jensen has said many times over the last year that physical AI, the physicality of AI, is the future. And certainly you can see that reflected in how companies are building out automation for their supply chain as well as factories, et cetera. But it's interesting to see, when you walk around MWC, just how many robots there are or were, at the show on display. And none more interesting to me, by the way, than the Dinobot, which was a Velociraptor. Cheap price tag, only 24,000 euro to pick this up. But you could have your own, autonomous Velociraptor to follow you around and scare off the neighborhood dogs if needed.
Is that the key use case, you think?
I think so. or to play parties and bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, I guess. It would be really good for that.
Cool. Yeah. So it's MWC, I think is something worth looking at for not just, it's not mobile so much anymore as physical, and all those good things wrapped up with AI. So shall we switch gears, Brad?
Actually, before we do, I want to just chat briefly about Lenovo in particular, which had, for those of you listening to this podcast, before we came on the air, we were talking a little bit about booth space at this show and just how expensive it is and how varied the vendors were in terms of how they spent their money. And Lenovo's was one of the more or less extravagant ones comparatively. But I have the feeling, like when you look at some of what they rolled out at the show, in particular, their ThinkBook modular. If any of you haven't seen this, please look it up because it is fascinating. Last year we had their laptop that would flip up and make a really awkward looking laptop for the coffee shop to show off the fact that you have a very high vertical screen. This year, with the ThinkBook modular, it's basically the back of the screen is a screen, which is a second screen that you can pull out, set next to the laptop. The keyboard itself can be removed from the laptop, and that screen could be placed on that partition, making basically a hinged side-by-side screen that you could put up in the coffee shop to show people just how your money is being spent. But what struck me as really cool about this isn't this modularity for the keyboard and screen, but the fact that Lenovo now looks very much like I guess you would call it their rival framework, the framework laptop, which is very much plug and play. I need a USB-C port, plug it in. I need an adapter for SCSI, plug it in. And this laptop from Lenovo is built just like that. And I very much applaud their work here in moving us forward in terms of building laptops that are extensible. And it's more than extensibility, actually. It's repairability. For those of you who follow Lenovo, and perhaps are ThinkPad bigots like I am, you may have noted that with their recent T14 release, I think it's Gen 7, that they received a 10 out of 10 repairability score. They've always been great to repair, aside from a few models, but my goodness, to build a ruggedized, enterprise grade laptop that you can repair any way you see fit, new keyboard, new RAM, new hard drive, new monitor, whatever you want, that is impressive. So I tip my hat to Lenovo here.
Yeah, sounds it. I actually saw a video that the laptop you're talking about on Twitter. I was a bit silly. I probably walked past the Lenovo booth many times. I didn't go look at it, but yeah, it
because
did
it's not
look
flashy.
yeah, it was quite something though. But yeah, cool.
Well, it is interesting because so many people are, nerds like us are very excited about like the framework laptops because they're repairable. But it's really exciting to see a major brand leaning into that and, not using proprietary screws and everything. I mean, it's all well and good that Apple's stuff lasts a good long time because it's so well built. But boy, once it goes, and and yet these things are they're not just repairable but somewhat upgradable too. And that's a question that I have too about some of the AI laptops and machines that are coming out there. What happens when state of the art advances and hardware requirements need more? Is it just going to be a throwaway culture? Are we going to be able to upgrade these things like Lenovo's suggesting?
Well, if prices continue as they are for silicon, I'm going to say nothing will be thrown away. As we're seeing in the gaming community, older devices are being utilized and reutilized regularly right now. So I think this repairability and upgradability is going to play a huge factor as we move forward for how hardware is built. If for instance I don't need DDR5, I can get by with a slower RAM. Maybe I have a laptop that can accommodate both, so I can use chips from 5 years ago, and I'm still humming along. Just a thought, Lenovo, make it happen.
I think that may end up being easier said than done on that particular point.
Probably, right. I can dream. Yeah.
But with the price of RAM, I mean, that's another interesting aspect. We also got last week, Apple introduced the next generation of their M5 Pro and Max. And one point that went really under the radar is that they've canceled the high RAM version of the laptops. I think that they had a 256 gig RAM option or something like that, and now it's down to 128. What I've heard from insiders is that essentially it would have been priced out of the market because those chips are just not, they're just too cheap, which is incredible because if you look at the pricing of those models, Apple has not raised prices. I mean, their RAM was always extremely expensive. It was always very expensive to go with the bigger RAM model. It is still very expensive, but actually no more expensive. It is the same to the dollar as it was with previous generations. I wonder if they'll be able to continue that when it comes to RAM and SSD in the future. And I wonder, did you happen to notice, are other vendors either cutting back on RAM or raising prices due to the RAM crunch?
Did you see anything with that, Nick? I haven't seen anyone dropping the amount of RAM back, except Apple, actually.
No, I haven't.
Right, with
But
Neo.
as an Apple user, I know exactly what you mean. You've got to buy your RAM up front because doing it later is basically, technically,
you can't.
Well, the M series is physically impossible. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. $200 a step. That's not cheap, but cheaper than a DGX Spark.
Yeah. But that being said, it is interesting that they've managed to hold the line. So you didn't hear a lot of because in briefings and so on, I do hear a lot of vendors privately talking about the RAM crunch and expense of RAM and the lack of availability. Did you see that at MWC?
I didn't, but I must admit I probably was not looking for it. I was looking at the different layers of the stack than the RAM and the.
You were whistling past that graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
I do hear outside of MWC from the storage players quite a bit of discussion about this in terms of long-term options and what they want, how they want to approach it, and by and large, it is very much keyed around optimizing what they have to look for the bottlenecks and to squash the bottlenecks. That's the key.
So in other news, we've been hearing a lot about neoclouds. In fact, I was amazed to see the term neocloud and Nscale specifically mentioned in above the fold, New York Times, Washington Post, sort of mainstream news sources this week, talking about what apparently is the largest C round raise in history for a European company. Nick, what's your perspective on Nscale?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think it's an interesting story, and people may be saying who on earth are Nscale, and they wouldn't be particularly. It's quite a justifiable position to have because this company didn't really exist 2.5 years ago. So Nscale has raised a $2 billion Series C round, which it says is the largest Series C round in European history. About 6 months ago, Mistral raised a $2 billion C round as well. So it obviously there might be some currency exchange fluctuation going on there, but it doesn't really matter. It's a lot of money, and I think this also gives it a valuation of just under $15 billion. And then we've got Acre, ASA, and 890 Industries, and some of these companies, these funders coming in again for the company. So the company was essentially spun out of what was originally a Norwegian Bitcoin mining firm, and so this is a familiar tale with different countries inserted, I guess. And so the company was part last September in London when Jensen Huang came over and sort of anointed his favourites among the European, specifically the UK startups. Yeah, they were one, and they said, "Yeah, I'm going to invest in you." The Prime Minister on the stage and all this kind of stuff. But at that point, they'd only raised $185 million. So I saw in the announcements, Nscale is partnered with Microsoft. Back then they're going to build these data centers. I'm like, what with? They haven't got any money. So of course,
other people's data centers, Nick?
Well,
is that how you do it?
They raised some debt. They did some debt funding in the late of 2025, and now they've raised this money. So putting aside, and also they announced a couple of sort of 3 board members: Susan Decker, Sheryl Sandberg, who we all know, and Nick Clegg, who's the former deputy prime minister of this country, and was obviously on the Meta policy guy for many years. So they're kind of trying to throw their weight around a little bit in terms of the building, and they're also part of the Stargate Norway project last year. But anyway, it's interesting, I guess, from kind of broader sovereignty issues. They're kind of threading a needle a bit though, because they're kind of being a European sovereign play while being sort of deeply embedded in sort of US companies like Nvidia, providing with chips, like Microsoft is partner in data center. Well, Microsoft's not doing the builds, but Microsoft's helping fund these things. So it's an interesting angle, and it's a very similar story to the likes of CoreWeave in the US, Nebius in the Netherlands, and Iron, which is originally an Australian company. I know it's floated in the US. So it's an interesting play. But one of the numbers that kind of caught my eye was the company said in the next 5 years, so that's 2031, it needs to raise another $45 billion.
To do what?
For data centers. So that's quite a lot of money. And so we've gone from like 185 million in September of last year to I raised a few billion now, including this $2 billion round. And so there's a lot of we know the story obviously of the 690 billion committed capex from the US hyperscalers, plus including Meta, who's not really the same business, but put them in the same bucket for this. But there's a lot of this going on, and in other countries, I guess, is the point. We've heard about some of the ones in the Middle East in the past. Obviously, that's a slightly different situation now, perhaps. But there's British ones here, there's French ones, there's German ones. So it's a bigger story out there of what people are kind of calling the circular economy of this, and so obviously be tracking them pretty closely as to see how what they're actually how they're going to be getting on over the next few months.
And I have to say, I don't think that it's just pure speculation, although that does play a massive role in both the large scale data center build outs and the neocloud build outs. But if you look at how the AI marketplace itself is building the software that would ostensibly run in said data centers, you can see this shift right now toward what I would call more ambient inferencing. Which if you think about, even last week with Asus, which now has the NUC name for the small, devices, desktop, PCs that they stole from Intel. That basically, they now
Editor's
use.
note: nobody stole anything here. Go ahead.
Right. Sorry. They are now using, which I think is a wonderful brand, by the way. Anyway, the fact that what they're promoting is this device not as something that you do your spreadsheets on, but instead something you run your Claude bots or your OpenClaw or now your Microsoft Copilot Cowork on 24/7 as an agent that just runs in the background, I think speaks volumes to what the vendor landscape anticipates for AI in the workplace. And that is, as I just mentioned, this ambient intelligence. But it's more than that too. As we've known and we've talked about on this show for a while now, there are different classes of models that are your frontier scale, that you basically your Geminis and Anthropics, Claudes, et cetera, that you are inferencing from a hyperscaler. And then there is a smaller class of model that is more like what we've seen recently from the Qwen team, that is geared towards smaller 27 billion on down, let's say. And those are all giving builders in the enterprise much more optionality in terms of where they run their inferencing, where they spend their inferencing dollar. So you might, for instance, have a plan with Anthropic, you might have a plan with Google, and you would have the ability to then supplement or extend that through neocloud partnerships or running locally as well, all three, that you would use to sort of optimize your own spend on inferencing to route the request to the right model at the right time at the right price. So we're seeing this sort of move toward being able to tailor your inferencing spend to the task at hand, and that's why we see such an opportunity for these neocloud providers in particular.
Yeah, and you mentioned Qwen there, Brad. There's been some developments, haven't there?
Yeah, there sure have. It's such a well-regarded family of models and has been for a long time, especially for code generation. And with the 3.5 release that they just came out with, the entire AI community was quite a buzz, were they not, at just how good this family of models is. And it was very strange that shortly thereafter, as in what was it, Stephen, one day that we
Yeah,
saw.
it looks like one day. I mean, I was watching Simon Willison's blog about it, and he's been very bullish on Qwen 3.5, and then suddenly, oops,
gone. Yeah, but and to their credit, well, you would imagine they would do this, but Alibaba was very quick to say, look, we're not shutting this down. This is going to continue. It is an open source project and will continue to be so. And at MWC, there was a booth that they had with the Qwen glasses, which compete with the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. It was very much on display and had people talking about it, even though it was monochrome in green. So fantastic that the text is in hacker green, by the way, in your heads up on the glasses. But is making some waves, and not just regionally but globally.
Mm. And just talking of people who've left interesting lab companies, just coming back to Europe for a second, if I may. 10 years ago, European rounds were like, here's 5 million euros, here's 10 million euros, et cetera, et cetera. And we've already just talked about Nscale, and it's 2 billion. The other ones, I just wanted to point out, there was, I think it was just maybe today when we're recording, Lian LeCun's advanced machine intelligence raised a $1.03 billion, obviously trying to translate the euros to get it over, seed round, which was quite something. They're based in Paris. They're going to have office people in New York and Singapore and various other places. And the former Google, the DeepMind guy, David Silver, he raised $1 billion seed round last month, led by Sequoia. He's in London to develop his company called Ineffable Intelligence, to build some sort of human, super intelligence thing. So so some of these people are leaving amicably. Some of these people are leaving maybe in Jan LeCun's case, perhaps slightly less amicably. But they're chasing. There's a lot of money chasing them all over the world, no matter where they might be.
Yeah, one thing that I want to kind of, I guess, maybe finish on here, since we're getting to the end of time. Not literally the end of time, but the end of this episode's time.
Hopefully.
Maybe we're getting to the end of time too. I don't know. But I stirred up a little bit of a hornet's nest in social media this week by suggesting that local LLMs are bunk. Not generally, but specifically with regard to agentic applications like OpenClaw. And one of the things that I've heard, and Brad, I heard you just mention something like this, people saying, I'm going to run OpenClaw locally, and that will solve my problems. And I'm raising my hand here and saying, point of order, no one is running OpenClaw locally, even though they think they are, because they're all using the large SaaS models online to actually do the work, the AI work, because no one has shown, well, at least I haven't seen anyone who has been able to build a workstation powerful enough to handle the kind of context windows and the large size models required to do the actual any decent job of actually open clawing. Now, you could certainly use some local models, and I've seen some people try to do it. But the problem is right now the hardware just can't handle it, and the SaaS models are so good, so much better, that essentially every FAQ out there, including my own experiments with that, have shown me that you just can't run it locally. Now, do you think that's going to change, or do you think that these alleged local, captive, owned, private agentic experiences built around OpenClaw and similar technologies, do you think that is actually going to be able to be run locally? Maybe, Brad?
Yeah, I think if we can all afford DGX Sparks, absolutely. There's no reason why you couldn't run that locally with a large enough model. But that's, as you rightfully pointed out, Stephen, is the problem. It's simply physics in terms of the VRAM you need and the context window that these agents require in order to function properly over time. And that is the real problem. I'm sure, with a model that has a diminutive context window, you could offload certain tasks that your local OpenClaw agent might do, such as organizing your inbox or your in downloads folder. Do you really need a frontier model to do that? No. So you could route to that local model to offload from the cloud-born agentic model where appropriate, necessary. And I would think that we will see more and more sort of more mature implementations of this idea of a local agentic system that will incorporate those kinds of tactics, if you will, or best practices. But for right now, yeah, you're if you're going to run this on GPT OSS 200, is it two or no, it's 20 billion parameters. For example, you are going to have a very bad experience.
Yeah.
Just full stop.
And not only that, but it's just really practically not going to work. I mean, I did try it, and there's always the reply guys in social media who are like, "Oh, but And the thing is, I've tried it. I tried to run it with Olama locally. I tried to run it with DeepSeek and Quen and some of these other models locally. They're too slow. They don't have the context window. They don't have the reasoning ability to get a functional OpenClaw running. Now, again, maybe if you've got a DGX Spark, I don't. Maybe if you have a quad Mac Studio setup like Jeff Deerling showed off on his
12
blog,
of them. Yes. Yes.
then that's going to work. But for me, in my experiments, it absolutely didn't work. And like I said, if you actually are in the community, you see that community people just say, no, that's really not practical at this point. So we'll see if it is in the future. Again, I would love to see that become practical, but I think that that's going to come head to head with the RAM crisis, at least for the next year.
Yep.
So before we go, again, as I mentioned at the top, this week, as you're listening to this, is GTC. Now, you probably noticed that we didn't put our Palantirs, I'm sorry to mix metaphors there, and look forward into the future of what GTC will bring, because, we can't really talk about it even if we were pre-briefed or even if we do have guesses. But we definitely will be coming back to you next week with another episode of Utilizing AI. Before we go, though, Nick, what do you look forward to that you can talk about as of now?
So I mean, obviously, that we know there's going to be some sort of chip announcements. I don't have privileged information on that, and I wouldn't obviously disclose it if I did. One thing though that I suspect Jensen will be talking about is this 5-layer cake metaphor that he introduced it at Davos, and he's actually they've just published a blog post on it. NVIDIA have, and it's the 5 layers are energy, chips / semiconductor manufacturing, computing infrastructure, including data centers, foundation models, and then applications. And what his argument is essentially is that you as whether it's an enterprise or a government or an investor, really need to think about AI in all these levels. And all that means is not just software, and it's not just the models. We've always said, we all know the models are not the applications, and the applications themselves are not enough. It requires all these things to be looked at in a holistic way. So it's kind of framing for investors, for enterprise leaders, and for policymakers. And I think that's partly, NVIDIA has become a lot more active in the lobbying and the policy making kind of domain over the last couple of years. And I think we're talking about here for some sort of the way we look at energy and data centers and the interaction between those and the foundation models. Just trying to put all that together. So to make people think about things like that. So I don't know what's going to be his keynote at this point where I'm talking, but I'd be surprised if that's not mentioned.
Yeah, and I would love to see some mention and some work around their support of the open source community. They have been, despite having a lot of locked down IP, and rightfully so, it is theirs. They have been quite active in promoting and supporting the open source community, and I think that before we came on the air, we were actually chatting about this a little bit. That Jensen has some sessions lined up for the show in which he's going to bring to the stage and speak with the open source model makers about what they need. What can they look to NVIDIA to support them with? So I like that.
Yeah, that's a key session for them, I know. And Jensen does one of these a year. Last year it was on quantum, which was kind of sorry for messing around with your share price of your publicly traded companies. This year is about open. You say he's got the LangChain cursor, reflection, perplexity, thinking machines, Mistral, Open Evidence AI2, and Black Forest Labs. And so for them, it's great to have him be the moderator, and it's a huge draw. And I think it's on the Wednesday. So yeah, that's I think that'd be a highlight of the entire show.
Well, we will definitely be covering GTC next week on this. Again, we record, on Tuesdays ahead of a Wednesday episode. That's, so it's going to be a little bit delayed. But if you want your fix on GTC news, I would definitely keep an eye on the analysts, researchers, and community around the Futurum Group. We will be covering this live on our social media. We will be posting articles on the Futurum Group website, as well as the various Techstrong sites, including Techstrong AI. So do keep an eye on that. And of course, we will react on the next episode of Utilizing Tech or Utilizing AI here. Before we go, I do want to give y'all a chance to pitch what y'all are working on. I take it that neither of you is going to GTC, but I know that we do have some Futurum analysts going there from the Tech Field Day team. Alistair Cook will be there. Nick, what are you working on, and who else is going to GTC, if you know?
So Brendan Burke, our semiconductor lead, is going to GTC. I normally go, but I'm training for a marathon, and it's incredibly disruptive to that, so I can't. But Brendan Burke will be there, and he'll be reporting back. In terms of what I'm working on, I've just published my new data set, the AI Decision Makers Survey. So that's 800 plus decision makers in North America, Western Europe, and parts of Asia. And so we're looking in there into use cases, challenges, budgets, and of course, no kind of survey or these kind of reports is complete without a maturity model. So I have a 5-stage maturity model, and it's really interesting looking at what the profile of a stage 5, i.e., the most mature kind of companies are. So watch this space. You'll be seeing more about that soon.
Yeah, and likewise, I'll be publishing our decision maker for data intelligence, analytics, and infrastructure as well. I don't have a 5-stage model, maybe a 2-stage rocket, but we'll need to compare notes, Nick, on that one. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to publishing that in the next week or two. Also, next week, I'm going to be at Microsoft's FabCom. So the week you're watching this, I will be roaming around thinking about all kinds of knowledge graphs versus context graphs. So stay tuned for more on that. I'll be writing about what I see and hear there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I appreciate having you both join me on this episode and every episode. I mean, it's always a lot of fun to talk to you and get your perspectives on what's going on in this crazy industry. And thank you, everyone, for listening as well. This is, of course, utilizing AI. And if you enjoyed it, we would love for you to subscribe. The easiest and most, best way you get to see our pretty faces is if you subscribe on YouTube. But of course, you can find us in your favorite podcast application, as well as on Techstrong.ai and the Techstrong TV app, which is available in most app stores. This podcast is brought to you by the experts and analysts from the Futurum Group, where insights meet AI. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week. Generative AI is more connected to the world of business intelligence and data analytics than any other area of enterprise IT technology. This episode of the Tech Field Day podcast, recorded prior to Click Connect 2026, features Brendan Grady of Click joining Brian Budin and Gina Rosenthal to discuss how this market is advancing. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we bring together a group of IT technical experts to discuss a single idea about key concepts in the industry. This podcast features a variety of perspectives from members of the Tech Field Day community and is often recorded in association with one of our events. Tech Field Day is part of the Futurum Group, and this podcast is also published on our sister company's site, Techstrong TV. On this episode, as we look forward to Click Connect in April, we're talking about the ways in which business intelligence and data analytics have changed in the generative AI era. But before that discussion, let's meet who's on the panel today.
Hi, my name is Brendan Grady. I am the general manager of the AI and analytics business unit here at Click.
Hey, my name's Brian Budin. I'm the managing director at BB Data Services, and I'm a 9-time Click Luminary and Partner Ambassador.
Hey there, I'm Gina Rosenthal, and I am the founder of Digital Sunshine Solutions, where we help businesses make sense of their very intense technical products with AI and cloud and that kind of thing. Looking forward to Click again, so ready for this conversation.
And I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of the Tech Field Day events here, and a Click Connect veteran a bit, I would say. This is going to be my third time joining the crew at Click Connect, and I'm really looking forward to coming back to seeing Gina, Brendan, Brian again. Now, for those of you who are listening and maybe aren't aware, so Click is one of the leading companies in the data analytics, business intelligence world. They have a really kind of a fanatical fan base in this world, and it shows at Click Connect. The people that show up, the kind of discussions we have, the kind of goofy, fun stuff that happens behind the scenes. It really is different from what you might expect at some sort of dry tech conference. And Click Connect also has some other interesting and fun elements. The show floor is really exceptional, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But one of the things for me that gets me the most is, like many conferences, there's an opportunity to talk to people and learn from them. That's really why I go to these events. But Click really facilitates that, both in terms of the folks who work for Click as well as the folks who are attending the event. And I've had just some absolutely incredible conversations here and there and around the corner with, attendees, whether they are presenters or staff, or frankly, even better, some of the folks who are coming and bringing their expertise and their learning from what they've done out there in industry. Of course, last year we spent a lot of time talking about generative AI. And this year, we expect that to be even more of a focus area, a focus for Click. So, Brendan, let's start with you. You've seen the secrets, you've seen the schedule, the agenda, you know what's going to be presented, and you can't talk about it. But I bet what you can talk about is some of the general themes. So, talk to us a little bit about this. What can we expect from Click Connect, and what does that mean to people out there that are dealing with business intelligence and data?
You're right. I can't really talk a lot about it, so this could be a very quiet section, Stephen. However, I am going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek of what we're going on here. All of us that have been in this domain for many years have witnessed what has sort of happened with people's user experiences, and it all started with OpenAI's ChatGPT being released a couple of years ago now, right? It feels like a lifetime ago. So what you can expect out of this particular event is to hear about how people's user experiences, whether they're in the data engineer domain or whether in the analytics domain, those experiences are going to change. But that how Click is in a position to support that evolution to this new world, which is really all about agentic AI. And then Brian and I were just talking about how every year there seems to be a shift in this technology. And I think, Brian, you and I agree that it's sort of every couple of months or every month there seems to be a massive shift. So there's some things that we did that have happened since last year that we'll really be able to hone in on, specifically around agentic experiences and what that means for all of our customers and people that work with Click.
Yeah, Brendan, I think that's relevant. And as you talked about before, I think last year at Click Connect, there was a lot of groundwork being laid for AI, right? There was a lot of theory being passed around, and there was a lot of understanding about, well, how can we prepare for the onset of AI? And now AI has really migrated past that whole chat GPT section that we talked about there, where people were just hacking in stuff into their chat GPT windows into something that is really authentic in terms of AI and BI. So what are some of the big steps that you've seen in that interim period? Because like you say, this market is moving incredibly quickly. So what are your big observations in that area just now?
So the big observations are still some numbers that are out there, Brian, around the percentage of organizations that have actually successfully implemented agentic AI. No big secret for everybody listening to you, Stephen. It's not a very high percentage, right? And that's one of the things. So where we've really been focusing on is let's get out of the science project area and sort of the laboratory and take advantage of what Click has always done extremely well, which is really make sure that we can give some context around what you're trying to understand around your business. Because when there are humans involved, it's one thing. We can look at it and determine when this agentic world starts kicking in, there may be autonomous agents making decisions on your behalf. And if you don't have the context and you don't have data that you can trust, those agents are going to make really bad decisions on your behalf. And then you know how challenging that could be. And the Gina, I know sort of your space, you trying to make it real. So it'd be really sort of interesting to get your perspective on sort of how we're thinking about it and some of the things that Brian and I just brought up there.
No, I'm looking forward to. That's one of the reasons I liked going to Click. In addition to what Steven said, just there's so many. It's very obvious you put a huge amount of emphasis on your users and making that user experience amazing, which is great. Yeah, there's so much hype. It's ridiculous. Like, how do you know what to do and how to do? And yet everybody's doing it. And we talk about this on our podcast a lot. Uh, there's even though there's so many horror stories, there's so many good stories. That's another thing I enjoy coming to Click about. People finding their way through the hype and honing in on their data and their people and their processes to make sure they can figure out what these agents are doing. So I'm really interested to hear if you guys have a way to easily help people understand what's agentic and what is people, because that's, I think, something that's huge, just something people are worried about and people are talking about. So nice teaser, Brendan.
I'd love to tell you more on this session, but we're still about a month away, so can't really get into details. But I can tell you, Gina, I promise you that if you come and listen to that, you will hear how we can give that traceability, that lineage, everything you want to understand to make sure that your agents are acting safely and in a way that you can trust. So there will be a lot of talk about that at our at the keynote.
That's so huge. And I think for everything that gets talked about in AI, the biggest piece of a kind of the AI factory, honestly, is that data prep. And hardly anybody talks about it. But like it's expensive. A lot of people are involved, a lot of resources are involved. And to get the data right is so incredibly important. And I'm glad y'all are talking about it.
And that was one of the things, if I can jump in on this, that came through last year with Click Connect. We spent a lot of time talking about data quality and the impact of quality and what quality means. That it doesn't just mean, that you have some data and that it's accurate data, but that you have that sort of, as you mentioned there, Brendan, lineage, that you have sort of a quantitative assessment, a way to determine whether this data is truly high quality data. I'm curious if that has gone, I guess, out of the lab and into the world, into the customer world. Is data quality a vernacular that you're hearing from your customers, and is this something that has been implemented by them?
So we're definitely starting to hear that, and it's a little bit shocking to me that we're sitting here in 2026 talking about data quality initiatives again. I figured we would have solved that 25 years ago, but it's coming to the forefront. It's really interesting, and I'm going to sort of date myself and say that, when I got into this space way back in the early 2000s, data quality was cool and it was all the rage. You had to have the best data. 2026, data quality is cool again. Hashtag data quality is cool again. So what we're seeing is that customers don't want to just make sure the data is real time anymore. They want to make sure it's available to them immediately, that either a human or an agent can say, yes, quantitatively, that data is accurate and you can make decisions off of that. But the added thing with agents is around, how do you make sure that there's context for those agents that may make a decision off of that data? Because it's more than just the veracity, the volume, and all those sort of the five V's. It really gets down to, yeah, you have your data, it's trusted, and here's the context of what's behind it. And Brian, I think sort of you've been working with Click for a long time, and you know what our engine can do there.
Yeah, you used two words there, Brendan, I want to pick out. There's context and there's trust, right? And last year, trust was a huge thing about being able to not only understand that your data has a high level of quality, but how long does it take for an organization to be able to trust their data? That's not just a data quality issue. That is a human trust issue as well. And you talk about the importance of being able to interject at parts of the AI pipeline and pass it on to human intervention to be able to ensure that that trust can grow in a consistent manner. So I'm hoping we see something more in terms of those opportunities to be able to interject. It sounds a bit backwards, right? Because it sounds like you want to say, I want the human back in the loop, but you still need the human in the loop at the right times, right? And that's where the key part is, as far as I see it.
I can confirm you will see some of that, Brian, on main stage and as well as in some of the breakouts.
Yeah, isn't it funny that we're once again, I feel like the old Bernie Sanders meme. I'm once again here to talk about, people, processes, data quality. The same thing we've been talking about forever, but it has become so much more important now because of these AI agents that people are trying to deploy. Because you have to figure out when people need to be in the loop. You have to figure out AI is both a consumer of data and a producer of data. And so you have to figure out what that means for your overall business processes and business intelligence and data, choices. It would be very easy to lose sight of reality with AI out there confidently diving in and answering all your questions and doing your homework for you. But that's just not going to work. Gina, we've talked about this a lot, that people should be using AI as a tool, not as a surrogate.
No, exactly. And you can't even use it as a tool without understanding the context of the data. So it's fine to want to go fast and to achieve great things with automated means. But especially in the case of generative AI, where it's just predicting the sequence of words, if the data is out of sequence, as if to say not situated correctly in the data set. And like to give a real world example of that, what if I'm trying to run a launch and the data that I'm using is from 2 launches ago and I don't have all of the brand new things I want to hype on? Or what if my data for the market, if we're trying to figure out, well, where are we gonna put these campaigns, and who's gonna really want to buy this? Which are the first things a product marketer asks. Who's gonna buy this, and where should we push on? Like, how can you do that with data that is old? And if I go to do some sort of process, as I do, right, with clients, if the data I have is incomplete, which happens a lot with clients at the very beginning of things, or if it is old, then the results I give from doing something with generative AI will all be wrong, and I have to do them by hand anyway. So what's the point of using AI?
Yeah, two things I want to no, it's great. You're spot on. There are two things I want to touch on there. Just one anecdotal story. I had to write my bio for the website when I got my new job 2 years ago. So I did what any modern exec does, and I log into one of the generative AI tools and give my LinkedIn profile and say, write a job description and write a title and everything for my website. It wrote the most amazing story about me. It was amazing. All wrong, but amazing. I mean, that's the funny thing. It said I had my PhD in applied math and physics from Cal Berkeley, and that I work with underprivileged children on the weekends. I wanted to post it on the website, but it was so there was that. But it brings up a more important point in today's world, right? So it's a funny story. The challenge with some of these agentic tools and some of these generative tools is that they're very good at getting that unstructured data in a bit of a format of a story that you can tell. But when you start adding in what has been traditionally in our space, and I'll punt this to Brian in a second here, which has been that structured data so you can make business critical decisions, the LLMs stink at math. They're just bad at it right now. They'll get there. But this is one of the things that you'll hear about at Connect, where we now have the ability, and this is not a pre-announce, but we already talked about this earlier this year. We have the ability to bring that structured and unstructured data together in the same type of analysis. And that in and of itself, that is a massive leap forward for customers who are going down this agentic path. And Brian, you've been working with us for years, so you know why we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan, I would say that Click have really been an overdrive in terms of the private preview side of things this year as well, and really getting the right access to the right customers and partners to be able to evaluate this technology as you're developing it. And I think we all know that structured and unstructured data, so effectively being able to take all of the documents that you have on all of your drives across all of your network and combine it with all of that real pure data quality filled data that you have in your apps, and fusing that has been an issue for a long, long time with a lot of data. And I think that's what's really cool about Click Answers and the new version of that, is And I wondered whether to think about this as a criticism or not, Brendan, but I've decided that it's not a criticism, that it actually stops and thinks, right? A few comments I had were like, well, why can't we have a fast button on this? And I was like, hold up. Do you really want to be using Opus, or do you really want to be using Sonnet for this? Just as a cloud-based example here. And this is the one time that you really do want to have that deep dive, and you really have to be a bit patient to wait a few more seconds to get the correct answer, because, as Gina already said, if you have the wrong data coming from the right place or vice versa, and then you've got a bunch of sources, then that's when it starts to get, and I'm sure technically, quite complex as well. So yeah, I think it's a real positive that you have to wait for a little bit.
Yeah, Brian, I love you called it the fast button, because the original name that I came up for the fast button was the get me to my incorrect answer really quickly so I can spend time updating my CV, was a little bit long, right? I mean, but Gina, you're laughing because if customers get this wrong, there are consequences in it. It's not good consequences when this stuff goes bad.
Yeah, I was thinking of my own, the tool that I'm using, I always forget to switch it when I'm doing something technical to think really hard, use the newest model. And so I did some vibe coding, and I just was trying to build a little bot to do something silly. But everything on Microsoft Teams had changed. That went to a platform since they had done the fast one. So I had to redo the whole. I'm going through the steps to build it together, to build this little agent, and I'm having to read through Microsoft documentation, which is, so it's trying to figure out. So it's also just a human issue. So imagine doing that in a big organization, and how you have the easy fast button, and it goes real fast. The trust is totally eroded. Number one, so no one wants to use it. And then secondly, number two, you're spending more time trying to get to the actions you were promised it was going to do for you. So it's a human issue always. It's always a human issue. And losing that trust and making it so people don't want to use it because it's not working correctly yet that's a costly mistake.
Not to get into our technology too deep, but I think this is I love what I'm hearing from both of you, because we actually, in our early access programs on our latest set of capabilities, we actually implemented a few changes to make it quicker. And some of our customers were saying, well, that was amazingly fast. It was all wrong, but it was amazingly fast. So we guided, Brian, sort of that user experience on the grounds that people need to make decisions off of this information. More importantly, machines are going to start making decisions off of this information. And if it takes just a microsecond or 2 seconds or 3 or 4 seconds longer, we would rather have our customers be safe and confident, because that's Qlik's history. That's what we've always done well. And we're going to maintain that. And you'll hear that at Connect. Big theme.
So one of the things that we've been hearing about from Qlik in terms of specific technology, Brendan and Brian, and is this discovery agent, and generally in the industry. I know Jana and I have been talking about MCP. Brian, what are you looking forward to from that, and what are your thoughts on the way that Qlik is working in the agentic world?
I think Qlik has quite rightly eased themselves into this, right? I think we heard a lot about the potential of these concepts last year, but again, with the private previews now coming through for MCP and for Discovery Agent, that word trust again is really coming to the surface, right? And it's about Qlik trusting its customers and partners to have the right level of technical understanding of what they're trying to do, and to not misinterpret that. It's all great having MCP access and being able to pipe that to your favorite LLM, but if you're not educated in how to use that and you don't understand the restrictions that are there, that's an important thing. But I think I'll throw this one to Brendan as well. The Discovery Agent is one that my customers are really excited, probably most hyped about, if I'm allowed to use that word. They care about like all of the technical stuff, but they really want the stuff that tells them, oh, my carrots were 29% up overnight. Why did that happen? Yeah, talk a little bit about Discovery Agent, why that's going to make a difference for a lot
Well,
of
one of the
customers.
things that everybody that's listening to this should understand is that Click is customer zero. Let that sink in for a second. So we use our own products. And if you think about my own role, Brian, as the general manager of sort of the largest division of Click, I want to be able to understand what's going to happen with my business. I'll be clear, I don't want to log into my dashboard to do that. I don't. I want it. I want an agent sitting there monitoring the health of my business, whether it's around bookings, whether it's around customer support cases, things that may even be posted to social media that can proactively tell me, you know what? Someone needs to go and address this. And that is the promise of the Discovery Agent. That's what we're really, really excited about. The second thing that we talked about, and we brought it up here, is MCP. MCP, it's the latest favorite three-letter acronym that seems to be out there all the time, but it'll always be a three-letter acronym. What we're really excited and what our customers are telling us they're excited about is that MCP is going to allow our customers to bring the power of our trusted data products plus the engine to where users work. If you work within Claude and that's the way you run your day, Gina, you talked a little bit about the product marketing world, probably spending your time in Perplexity or Claude to try to drive some things of what's happening there. Whether you use Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, I mean, we can continue the list. It goes on forever and ever. MCP is going to allow all of our customers to bring that power into that user experience. And that is going to fundamentally change the way people engage with data. And technically, why that's so exciting is the engine, our analytics engine, has the ability to ensure that the data within those questions you ask through MCP, through Claude, or anything else, that they're accurate and they don't hallucinate. That is what is extremely exciting because I challenge anybody who's listening right now to dump a spreadsheet into any one of the LLMs. Actually, do something this way. Dump 5 or 6 spreadsheets in and then start asking questions and have it build you a story. It'll be really pretty, but it'll be really wrong. That's what's so exciting about MCP. We can address that problem. And the promise is there. We've delivered. We won't just do a nice, pretty video on stage. I happen to know we'll be able to do something live and in person with real use cases as early as next month. Really exciting times.
Yeah, look, I think just to sort of tail off on that for you, Brendan, I think that use case part is super important, right? I think getting past the hype phrases of Discovery Agent, MCP, Claude, I think a lot of people in the market who even have some like touch point there know about those things and that they exist. But I think the use cases are what's really going to make this for the customers right now. That's what they want to see. How can I practically use this in my business? I think you used that same phrase right at the start of the session, Brendan. So
Sometimes technologists get enamored with technology for technology's sake, and it's cool, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But the reality of the situation for any business leader that is out there that really needs to think about how am I going to go to my board and say that agentic AI has improved productivity of my organization by whatever percent that may be, they have to be able to go with real use cases where they can apply it not 9 months from now, not 9 weeks from now, heck, 9 days from now, they need to be able to do that. And that's the promise that we want look to deliver against here over the coming months, because there's more than just the discovery agent. So stay tuned to Click Connect. There's more coming. That's what we're really excited about.
One of the things I liked at Click Connect too is your users force you to talk about what you announced last year. And I remember last year the different user presentations that were there were really good because they came up with, yeah, this was announced. Here's how we used it. Here's how we put it together and how you can do it too. So I'm hoping to see some of that again this year too.
Well, that's actually a great question. Let's kind of transition here into what we're looking forward to with Click Connect. I mean, for me, it is what Brandon was just talking about, these kind of real world use cases. I mean, that's where the gold is, when you get to sit down across the table from somebody who is implementing this stuff and hear how they're doing it, what they really think of it, unfiltered. This is the real state of affairs. But of course, there's also a lot of other things that happen. We've got a couple of keynotes. I'm hearing rumors that one of them might be especially amusing. The second keynote there. The first keynote's going to be all technical, and we're going to be live streaming our feedback from that on the Tech Field Day site. We're going to be doing a live blog, I should say, on that. Gina, you were at Click Connect with us previously. What are you looking forward to? What do you like to see again?
Everything is good. What I like, one of the things I did like, honestly, is the customers showing off what they have done and how they've been using it. So you hear the customer use cases, and in all the community events, their community is super activated and not shy in any stretch of the imagination. So they're very happy to tell you what's going on and what they like and what they don't like. I think that's pretty much what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. For me, it's the energy on the floor. I think you can go to many tech conferences and you just don't have that. And that's twofold, really. That's the customer energy that's on the floor, the buzz that's there. But I think it's also fair to say that the Click exec team do a really excellent job of being around. And I mean around in the truest sense, right? Where they're there to mingle where they can possible. And it's really nice to have that. It's a different kind of vibe from going into a grey square and walking around a bunch of booths. Click Connect isn't really like that, or never has been in my experience. So I'm really looking forward to seeing because we always get some surprises. So I'm looking forward to what's around the corner this time.
And Brendan, you get a different perspective on the show, but what's your perspective?
Yeah, I'm looking at all the insider trading notes I have on here about what we're going to announce. I'd love to share it on this. I can't. My perspective is, so I was unable to attend Click Connect last year because I had a bit of a health crisis. So I'm actually just looking forward to going back and seeing some of the customers that I know and really respect. I think, Gina, you said it well. Some of the customer stories, they're surprising at how much of an impact that we really have as an organization, but it's where we've always tried to be successful and help our customers. And Brian, just you've been in the ecosystem for years. I'll just say I love watching some of the partners show up dressed in full on green. Um, whether it's the green shoes, the green socks, or Dalton, if you're listening to this, your green tie, we love that. I can promise you I will have my green sambas this year, so we'll really get into it. But ultimately, it gets back down to talking to the customers and the partners. That's what really, really blows my hair back on this. So I'm looking forward to it. And then the surprises that we're about to announce in a couple of weeks here.
And one final thing too that I really enjoy about Click Connect is the sort of the vibe on the expo floor. Sometimes, as Gina and I have experienced for many years, and Brian, I know you and I experienced this as well at some conferences. It's a little lame. It's a little boring on the expo floor. That is not how the Click Connect expo floor is. Between the silent disco headphones, there's constant presentations. There's sure there's partner booths and click booths and so on, but it's very demo heavy. It's very inviting. And also there's always some other stuff on there, whether it is bicycles or motorcycles or race cars or whatever, there's always something fun and different and interesting to see. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing that as well. And if you are going to Click Connect, please do stop by. The Tech Field Day organization is going to be doing a lot of stuff in the media area at the center of the expo floor. We would love to talk to you. Also, if you're listening to this and you're saying, well, this kind of sounds kind of cool, you can still probably get there. I bet if you go to the Click Connect website, you could probably still get yourself to Orlando and join us. There's still time. So please do check that out. Before we go, I just want to give each of you a chance to tell us where can we continue the conversation, where can we connect with you? Brendan?
Obviously going to ask everybody to go to click.com. That is our main website. But I'd also encourage everybody that's listening in to connect with me on LinkedIn. Love hearing new perspectives.
Yeah, same for me. I'd love to meet as many of you as possible at Click Connect this year, but you can mostly find me on LinkedIn. That's where I live. So
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well, but I definitely want to hear the tea. That's what our podcast is all about. So check into Tech Auntie's podcast. And if you want to talk to me live while we're there, I would love to have that opportunity.
Yep. And you'll find me sometimes here on the Tech Field Day podcast, also every Monday live with Techstrong Gang, which is a daily news program, as well as Wednesday on the Utilizing AI podcast, which I host, which is very much in line with our conversation here in that it's all about practical uses of AI rather than the hype that we're constantly living in. So thank you both, all of you for delegates, Brian and Gina, Click, Brendan, thank you for joining us. And thank you everybody else for listening to this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe. You can find this on YouTube with video if you like to see our lovely faces. Or, of course, you can also subscribe in your favorite podcast application. This episode is brought to you by Click and Tech Field Day, and also, of course, the Futurum Group. For upcoming events and more episodes, head over to techfieldday.com/podcast, or you can view us and learn more at Techstrong TV in your favorite streaming device. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.